Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are now going through part 1, 6th chapter, the Ascent of Sacrifice 2. For those who are new, you can find the link to this chapter in the description. We are studying Sri Aurobindo's Synthesis of Yoga line by line, diving into it to internalize Sri Aurobindo's consciousness, to imbibe, to immerse in his state of being, state of consciousness. So this book acts like a portal through which we can enter. In our last episode, number 80, we saw that only the psychic being can discern when a higher consciousness descends. Every other part of our being, whether it is mind, heart of emotions, vital, other parts, they all, since they belong to the evolutionary past, carry the inertia and limitations of what has been built up. They tend to distort everything that is received, and they don't necessarily also turn towards a higher consciousness. Whatsoever is coming in, it will twist it around, turn it around, and make it their distorted, limited expressions. Whereas the psychic being, once the psychic fire is lit, that becomes the leader of our sadhana, our inner transformational work. And that brings this purity, wideness, and the discernment, unerring discernment. But this discernment can emerge only when these instrumental layers of the mind, vital, physical, are sufficiently purified and become increasingly receptive and passive. Then the psychic discernment and its effectivity become increasingly possible. Now let's move on to today's episode 81. We are starting with paragraph 14 of this chapter. And yet, even the leading of the inmost psychic being is not found sufficient until it has succeeded in raising itself out of this mass of inferior nature. This mass of inferior nature, the lower nature, where the body has emerged. In the body, the vital force, the life force has emerged. Living body in which the mind has emerged. All that are part of the nature's evolutionary past, and it is compared to the higher nature and its infinity and freedom. This is something quite inferior, limited, narrow. So the psychic being has to raise itself out of this mass of inferior nature to the highest spiritual levels, and the divine spark and flame descended here have rejoined themselves to their original fiery ether. This imagery here is also giving insight into the nature of birth itself, the process of birth, in which soul, from its higher planes of existence, it descends into this material nature, and it gets wrapped up in this material life and its limited mental instrumental layer. That's why he is here, the spark and flame descended here. The soul descended here and wrapped up, and this has to rejoin itself in its higher true plane, where it recovers itself in its purity, wideness, freedom, divine nature, is recovered. But the fire is there, ascending flame, what Vedic rishis adored as Agni. This Agni is burning within us. That becomes our longing for perfection, longing for beauty, longing for freedom, longing for love. That aspiration, once we bring that into life and that begins to ascend, that begins to transform, it helps us to liberate ourselves. And this inner guest ascending upward into the spiritual planes above recovers itself, rejoins themselves with their original fiery ether. He is using the imagery, the fiery ether, ether with capital E, the original source from where it has come. Let's read this line once again. And yet, even the leading of the inmost psychic being is not found sufficient until it has succeeded in raising itself out of this mass of inferior nature to the higher spiritual levels. And the divine spark and flame descended here have rejoined themselves to their original fiery ether. For there is no longer a spiritual consciousness, still imperfect and half lost to itself in the thick sheets of human mind, life, and body, but the full spiritual consciousness in its purity, freedom, and intense wideness. So when this soul descends and takes birth here in this material nature, these are the sheaths that forms. There is a material sheath, Annamaya Kosha. Then there is a Pranamaya Kosha, the vital sheath. Then there is a Manomaya Kosha, the mental sheath. These are the sheaths that covers and that also subjectively we experience as our mind, life, and body. And that limits. Whereas when it is able to liberate itself and rise upward, then it has the purity, freedom, and intense wideness. This body consciousness in which we wake up is like a small jail. And it is encased in that small, narrow formation. From there, when it breaks out, there is this intense wideness. And especially when you go upward, there is the dissolution of the ego and a vaster cosmic layers or cosmic planes opens up. There is an intense wideness that we will be discovering. So only when that happens, then there is no longer a spiritual consciousness still imperfect and half lost in itself, half lost to itself in the thick sheets of human mind, life, and body. So it is when it is trapped in these layers, it is half lost to itself. And then it steps back, recognizes itself, and learns to detach itself and open upward and ascends. That brings the true spiritual consciousness that is above in the higher nature. So, for there is no longer a spiritual consciousness still imperfect and half lost to itself in the thick sheets of human mind, life, and body, but the full spiritual consciousness in its purity, freedom, and intense wideness. There, as it is the eternal knower, here the knower is with capital K. It is an eternal knower. It was always there. It is an eternal knower. That becomes knower in us. So that eternal knower becomes the knower in us. Within this narrow mold that we consider to be I, me, is this small identity. Within that eternal knower descends into it and you become that knower. and mover and user of all knowledge. Not only knower, it is also mover and user of all knowledge. So it is the eternal, all blissful, who is the adored, attracting to himself the eternal divine portion of his being. This is the most beautiful secret to be discovered. This eternal, all beautiful, the divine whom we adore, who is actually the secret magnet, gently attracting to himself the eternal divine portion of his being. The psychic being here who takes birth is a portion of the divine above. From there, a portion descends here. But this portion, even though it is lost in these formations of mental, vital, physical sheets, it is being secretly attracted by that eternal knower self who is above. So there is this gentle lifting up, gentle attraction. That is what wakes us up. When time comes, the eternal knower creates the conditions in which we begins to wake up and we begins to search for purpose of life. And in that journey, we gradually discover there is the divine reality, there is a divine personality of the Supreme who is calling, you are an eternal portion. And that knowledge, psychic being naturally and spontaneously has that. It knows that I am an eternal portion of the divine. Therefore, it spontaneously worships and gives itself. Whereas our mind, our life energy, our body, none of them has this quality by themselves. They are too lost, too obscure material nature's formations. So the eternal, all blissful, who is the adored, attracting to himself the eternal divine portion of his being, and joy that has gone out into the play of the universe. This is another important thing. Birth is not a mistake. It is the divine plunging here as a portion to engage with the play of the universe. It is a game, a leela. It is for the joy of the play. The divine plunges here, takes birth, as a portion is sent down here, and that will become our tiny little individual who then totally forgets who you fundamentally is. But in right time, this forgetfulness is removed and you begin to wake up and search for yourself. The eternal divine portion of his being and joy that has gone out into the play of the universe. The infinite lover pouring himself out. It is an outpouring of that infinite lover's profound ananda in the multiplicity of his own manifested selves in the happy oneness. So there are manifested selves, the multiplicity of selves, that one sun scatters itself into the millionfold reflections in this manifest life. And these are many selves of one original being. And there is the happy oneness of the multiplicity in that realization of the Supreme Being, where multiplicity and oneness coexist without negating. This had been one of the fundamental challenge many yogins experienced, particularly when they open upward from the mind and ascend upward, mind blanks out and experience this infinite emptiness. And the world of multiplicity appears to be an illusion, a trap in which you were living, and you wake up and escape from the trap. In that perspective, the whole notion of birth itself is treated as a mistake. And the very purpose of spiritual life itself is to end the cycle of rebirth and get back to the original emptiness. Here is where Sri Aurobindo fundamentally departs. But this realization comes only when the psychic being has to be discovered and its ascension upward and union with the Supreme Divine above. That realization is what gives this experience of the multiplicity, the many selves of one being. So the very birth and the very process of birth and the evolutionary game being played on Earth, the project Earth where evolution is unfolding, in which we are participating, the divine is manifesting progressively. These pictures begin to reveal themselves. And for that, it is absolutely critical that we go into our inmost depth and discover the psychic being, light the psychic fire. And that Agni, that fire, will ascend upward and open to the higher planes, which can discern any descending force from above to be this is the true divine grace, and it will receive it without distortion, protect us, and it will bring this picture. There is, as it is, the eternal knower that becomes the knower in us and mover and user of all knowledge. So it is the eternal, all blissful, who is the adored, attracting to himself the eternal divine portion of his being, and joy that has gone out into the play of the universe. The infinite lover pouring himself out in the multiplicity of his own manifested selves in a happy oneness. That happy oneness. It's not a void. There is a happy oneness of one being embracing the multiplicity because it is the same self expressing itself infinite variety in the manifest world. All beauty in the world is there, the beauty of the beloved. When you discover the eternal knower, the all beautiful, oneself, then all beauty in the world is there, the beauty of the beloved. And all forms of beauty have to stand under the light of that eternal beauty and submit themselves to the sublimating and transfiguring power of the unveiled divine perfection. Unveiled divine perfection. Beauty is a perfection of form, and form acquires its perfection when it is expressing the divinity within. From there comes the harmony. Wherever there is harmony, there is beauty. Wherever there is beauty, there is delight. And this experience is native to the soul. Whereas if you explore the spiritual dimensions directly from the mind, it will enter into the dimension of emptiness, because mind untransformed cannot grasp the planes above. So it will experience what is above as a void. Whereas when we go deep into the inmost being and discover the psychic being, which spontaneously bring the natural, intimate connection with wider life, and from there ascend and discover the higher planes of existence, liberate itself into the pure, infinite freedom. And there that Ananda, beauty, everything manifests. Therefore, in this path, beauty plays a very, very central role. Mother and Sri Aurobindo repeats that beauty in the physical is the presence, an indication, a reflection of the divine. Therefore, beauty is something that our soul finds nourishment. All beauty in the world is there, the beauty of the beloved. And all forms of beauty have to stand under the light of that eternal beauty. So you are also developing a reference for an eternal beauty, an eternal perfection, and submit themselves to the sublimating and transfiguring power. Sublimation and transfiguration. So there is this influence coming in that refines our perception, our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, and our creations. The things that we manifest through us will acquire increasing refinement because we are beginning to refer to something that is increasingly sublime, noble, and eternal in its nature. So our outer instruments begins to open to this eternal standards of beauty that comes from within, its rhythm and flow. Then it brings the transfiguring power. So with that unveiling of the beauty, unveiled divine perfection is what actually transforms everything. This is something very, very unique the psychic being brings to our life. The role of beauty, its sublimating experience, and its transfiguring touch. And beauty, especially when it is opening to the divine consciousness above, it becomes an incredibly, intensely powerful experience that quietly makes everything sublime, and there is the transfiguring power of the unveiled divine perfection. All bliss and joy are there of the all blissful, and all inferior forms of enjoyment, happiness, or pleasure are subjected to the shock of the intensity of its floods or currents. So, all bliss and joy are there, the all blissful, in that higher existence. All bliss and joy are there of the all blissful, and all inferior forms of enjoyment, happiness, or pleasure. Our outer life, outer layers of mental, vital, physical nature, they have their inferior forms of enjoyment, happiness, or pleasure. But all of them are subjected to the shock of the intensity of its floods and or currents. So this inferior forms of our enjoyments gets flooded with what is coming from above. A greater flood of sublime beauty and ananda pours into the instrumentation that will make them undergo change. It's floods or currents, and either they are broken to pieces as inadequate things under its convicting stress. So this can also happen if they are not able to handle this intense influx. The instrumental layers break into pieces or compelled to transmute themselves into the forms of the divine Ananda. So these are the two options available to the lower nature instruments when the flood from above pours into this nature. They either are shattered into pieces or they are compelled to transmute into divine Ananda. This is the transformation process, something profoundly delightful, incredibly beyond our imagination, and done by the divine wisdom in its Ananda, flooding the instrumental nature. Our role is to be passive, be receptive, ascend, aspire, and open to that influx. All bliss and joy are there of the all blissful, and all inferior forms of enjoyment and happiness or pleasure are subjected to the shock of the intensity of its floods or currents, and either they are broken to pieces as inadequate things under its convicting stress, or compelled to transmute themselves into the forms of the divine Ananda. Thus, for the individual consciousness, a force is manifested. Force here is capital F. A force is manifested. The Shakti is manifested from an individual point of view, individual consciousness. Thus, for the individual consciousness, a force is manifested, which can deal sovereignly in it with the diminutions of and degradations of the values of the ignorance. There are these values of ignorance. Our lower nature and lower life in the materially enveloped material life, there are its own values, very diminished, degraded. All of them can be eventually transformed by it. So thus, for the individual consciousness, a force is manifested which can deal sovereignly. There is a masterfulness with which the Shakti, the force, deals with it, which can deal sovereignly in it with the diminutions and degradations of the values of ignorance. All forms of degradations and diminutions can be dealt with by the Shakti who descends, the force that descends. It's not just light that comes, it is the force that comes into and takes on the work of sublimation and transmutation, transfiguration, all that. At last, it begins to be possible to bring down into life the immense reality and intense concreteness of the love and joy that are of the eternal. So our conception of the divine here is of that. Love and joy of the eternal. Satchidananda. So at last it begins to be possible to bring down into life the immense reality, that higher consciousness. It is an immense reality compared to our narrow, shrunken life here, bound life here. When we are able to open to it and ascend to it, we experience the immense reality, and that can eventually be brought down. But to bring down, these instrumental layers must undergo transformation, and this transformation can be done only when the Shakti descends into it. Our individual will is utterly incapable of this transformation. At last, it begins to be possible to bring down into life the immense reality and intense concreteness of the love and joy that are of the eternal. Or, at any rate, it will be possible for our spiritual consciousness to raise itself out of mind into the supramental light and force and vastness. So at least this can be done. The mind can raise itself into supramental light and force and vastness. There in the light and potency of the supramental Gnosis are the splendor and joy of a power of divine self-expression and self-organization, which could rescue and recreate even the world of the ignorance into a figure of the truth of the Spirit. It is this supramental light and force that can bring this divine self-expression and self-organization all the way down to the material existence. No other plane of consciousness is capable of doing that except the supramental consciousness. Therefore, Sri Aurobindo repeatedly insists again and again about the discovery of the supramental consciousness. Historically, it had been happening, people ascending into these higher planes, but too early on, concluding that this is the end and bringing that into the planes that are below the supramental plane, but above our normal human mind. As Sri Aurobindo has already described in the earlier episodes, these planes are insufficient to fundamentally transform the material nature. It requires supramental light, force, and vastness. And that is the divine self-expression and divine self-organization ability, which could rescue and recreate even the world of the ignorance into a figure of truth of the spirit. So ignorance here is capital I. The world that is created out of the inconscient. That is the world of ignorance. And that undergoes transformation into a world of truth of the spirit. No more world that is built on inconscience, but on truth of the spirit. Let us read this line once again. Or, at any rate, it will be possible for our spiritual consciousness to raise itself out of mind into the supramental light and force and vastness. There, in the light and potency of the supramental Gnosis, are the splendor and joy of a power of divine self-expression and self-organization, which could rescue and recreate even the world of ignorance into a figure of the truth of the spirit. There, in the supramental Gnosis, is the fulfillment, the culminating height, the all-embracing extent of the inner adoration, the profound and integral union. There is partial union possible, there is integral union, that is the goal of integral yoga. Without integral union, especially union with the supramental Gnosis, this transformation of the earth consciousness, the life on earth, into divine life will not be possible. We had great masters who brought in spiritual powers, but not necessarily the supramental force. Therefore, such spiritual force works for some time, but eventually it will succumb to the distorting influences of the mental consciousness, vital consciousness, and physical consciousness and fade away. The only choice, if we are to divinize the life on earth, is to bring this supramental Gnosis. There, in the supramental Gnosis, is the fulfillment, the culminating height, the all-embracing extent of the inner adoration. The psychic being is the one who adores the divine. It culminates in the discovery of the supramental Gnosis, and it reaches its all-embracing extent of the inner adoration. The profound and integral union, the flaming wings of love. The flaming wings of love. What a beautiful image. The flaming wings of love, upbearing the power and joy of a supreme knowledge. Upbearing the power and joy of a supreme knowledge. Knowledge here with capital K. The truth can be known with that discovery. And that's the culmination for which the supramental, the integral yoga is conceived. The methodology that we follow is to reach that. the object of our yoga is to discover and unite with the supramental consciousness and bring that into this world so that there is an integral union. There in the supramental, Gnosis is the fulfillment, the culminating height, the all-embracing extent of the inner adoration, the profound and integral union, the flaming wings of love are bearing the power and joy of a supreme knowledge. That flaming wings of love is upbearing the power and joy of a supreme knowledge. So this is not any of the aspects. For example, fundamental powers are love, knowledge, and power, of which supermind integrates all three. It has this flaming wings of love, but it can upbear the power and joy of a supreme knowledge. And it has this immense power for self-expression and self-organization, where knowledge, power, and love moves together. Whereas in our fragmented existence, knowledge is in one direction, love goes in another direction, power goes in third direction. They don't work together. For supramental love brings an active ecstasy that surpasses the void, passive peace and stillness, which is the heaven of the liberated mind. Very crucial detail. There is the heaven of the liberated mind. Mind can liberate itself. And when mind liberates itself, what it will discover? It will discover the void, passive peace and stillness. So you will come across many spiritual traditions insisting on this to be the ultimate: void, passive peace and stillness. And this happens when the ascension happens from the mind and mind liberates itself. It is not about the psychic being, discovering the psychic being and its ascension, plain one after other. That these are two different movements. This is not understood in many traditions, therefore the confusion. In integral yoga, we need to have good clarity about this and not to arrive at the hasty conclusion when you enter into these experiences of void, passive peace and stillness, and you blank out in that. That's not the end. It is just the beginning. You may call it nirvana, but that is just the beginning of the journey. For supramental love brings an active ecstasy that surpasses the void, passive peace and stillness, which is the heaven of the liberated mind, and does not betray the deeper, greater calm, which is the beginning of the supramental silence. There is a supramental silence when the mind falls entirely silent. When the force descends from above, this is one of the indicators. It washes out all the thoughts. They become empty, void. And there is a silence of it, but it is still, you must remember, it is just the beginning of the transformational work that will unfold once the Shakti descends and begins the work. For supramental love brings an active ecstasy that surpasses the void, passive peace and stillness, which is the heaven of the liberated mind, and does not betray the deeper, greater calm, which is the beginning of the supramental silence. The unity of a love which is able to include in itself all differences without being diminished or abrogated by their present limitations and apparent dissonances, is raised to its full potentiality on the supramental level. So this love, the unity of a love which is able to include in itself all differences without being diminished or abrogated. Inclusion. These days we talk here about the inclusivity, but largely talking in terms of political lens of inclusion, gender-based, social status-based, all kinds of inclusion is talked about. But is here what is being referred is an inclusion happening at a spiritual level, where a divine love is manifesting that can include everyone and everything into it without diminishing or self-negating. Everything can coexist in perfect harmony. By their present limitations, differences without being diminished or abrogated by their present limitations and apparent dissonances, is raised to its full potentiality on the supramental level. So this love reaches its full potentiality in the supramental level. So the unity of a love which is able to include in itself all differences without being diminished or abrogated by their present limitations and apparent dissonances is raised to its full potentiality on the supramental level. 4. There, in an intense oneness with all creatures, founded on a profound oneness of the soul with the divine, can harmonize with a play of relations that only makes the oneness more perfect and absolute. There, an intense oneness with all creatures. Oneness with all creatures. There is this multiplicity that is becoming part of your existence, founded on a profound oneness of soul with the divine. So our individual soul unites with the divine, and in that union, everything is brought together. That can harmonize with a play of relations that only makes the oneness more perfect and absolute. So the play of relations, there are all types of relations possible in this manifest world. These relations, when it becomes play of oneness, that makes oneness more perfect and absolute. For there is an intense oneness with all creatures founded on a profound oneness of the soul with the divine, can harmonize with the play of relations that can only makes the oneness more perfect and absolute. The power of love supramentalized can take hold of all living relations without hesitation or danger and turn them Godward. Godwards delivered from their crude, mixed, and petty human settings and sublimated into the happy material of a divine life. So when our human love ascends upward and become the supramental love, that can take on anything and lift it upward to the fundamental transformation. The power of love supramentalized can take hold of all living relations without hesitation or danger. There will not be any danger provided supramental power has come down. Without any hesitation or danger, and turn them Godwards, delivered from their crude, mixed, and petty human settings. Our normal relationships are within the settings of the crude, mixed, and petty human settings, and sublimated into the happy material of the divine life. This can be sublimated into the happy material of a divine life. For it is the very nature of the supramental experience that it can perpetuate the play of difference without forfeiting or in the least diminishing either the divine union or the infinite oneness. That supramental experience has this unique nature. It can perpetuate the play of difference without forfeiting or in the least diminishing either the divine union or infinite oneness. There is a one union of the soul with the divine. Then there is the infinite oneness with the multiplicity. All this simultaneously exist without any loss, without any diminishing. For it is the very nature of the supramental experience that it can perpetuate the play of difference, perpetuate. It can engage in this worldly leela, engage in the evolutionary process here on earth through supramental force and its guidance, its direct action, self-expression, its ability to organize life on earth. It can do it successfully more than anything else. Rather, it is the only power that can fundamentally transform earth consciousness. For it is the very nature of the supramental experience that it can perpetuate the play of difference without forfeiting or in the least diminishing either the divine union or the infinite oneness. There's a play of difference. We need to understand that. Play of difference. In the lower nature, everything is splitting and growing, branching out, differentiating itself, all the way to increasing individualization, differentiation. Just like our body has a unique fingerprint, our every layer become highly individualized, and there is a profound uniqueness that emerges without losing oneness. For a supramentalized consciousness, it would be utterly possible to embrace all contacts with men and the world in a purified flame force. He is using an incredible image, flame force. A supramentalized consciousness, it would be utterly possible to embrace all contacts with men and the world in a purified flame force and with a transfigured significance. So with that light and force, there is a significance that reveals itself. It will be a transfigured significance because we are no more looking at the world from our normal human window. But remember, it is the eternal knower who becomes the knower in you. It is from the divine eyes you see the multiplicity and embrace the world. Because the soul would then perceive always as the object of all emotion and all seeking for love or beauty, the one eternal, and could spiritually use a wide and liberated life urge to meet and join with that one divine in all things and all creatures. There is a life urge. Life on earth that is flowing through us. Each individual has an urge to live, urge to conquer, urge to expand, urge to enjoy, this intense drive of life, to propagate, to grow, to enjoy, to conquer, expand. Everything is this, that's an urge of life, to meet and join the larger life. So this supramental force can take on this urge without getting diminished, distorted, and lost. Whereas every other ranges of consciousness below the supramental is bound to get lost. Supramental alone can do this transformation. It's a wide and liberated life urge. It's a wide and liberated life urge. It's not just individual human limited life urge, but it's a liberated life urge. This is a universalized life and its urge to meet and join with that one divine in all things and all creatures, because all life is one life. This one life is propelled and moved by the divine. And divine inhabitant is present in all life. And all of them can be met experience, united with, become part of your wider life. So, for a supramentalized consciousness, it would be utterly possible to embrace all contacts with men and the world in a purified flame force and with a transfigured significance. Because the soul would then perceive always as the object of all emotion, and all seeking for love or beauty. These are our experiences. Object of our emotions are seeking for love or beauty. So because the soul would then perceive always as the object of all emotion and all seeking for love or beauty, the one eternal, and could spiritually use a wide and liberated life urge. Use this wide and liberated life urge to meet and join with that one divine in all things and all creatures. What an immense liberated action will be possible when the supramental descent happens to the yogin's instrumental layers. There is such a liberated life force itself that can embrace the totality of life, meet all men and creatures, and use the life urge itself, a liberated life urge, for a spiritual use. These are the possibilities lying ahead on the path of integral yoga. So with that, we come to the end of today's episode. See you next week. And those who are new, kindly subscribe to the channel so that you can get notifications. Click on the bell icon so that you get the notification clearly. See you next week. Thank you.